Tasmia. Today I will be presenting my topic, which is workplace privacy and the rights and regulations that protect employees both domestically and internationally. So for the purpose of this presentation, I will be talking about workplace privacy in the United States, China, and Indonesia. The topics I will be discussing are down below. I will be going over a short introduction, the background and significance of why it's important, the global impact, some of the ethical considerations, as well as a conclusion. So to begin with, let's go over what exactly is workplace privacy. So workplace privacy refers to employees and their rights to their privacy, which contains confidentiality material, which can be in the form of personal information or digital communication that is protected from a framework. So essentially, corporations have legal documentation that is presented to employees, and underneath state and common laws, it will determine the level of privacy and legal actions that can be taken if these privacy acts are not enabled. So let's talk a little bit about existing privacy within the different regions. So to begin with, let's talk about privacy in the United States. So the United States of America has several laws and acts that are designated to provide employees the best privacy and the best separative legislative documents that entail all the acts as well as legal actions that can be concurred. So one of the most popular acts that many people have probably heard of is HIPAA. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1196. So HIPAA was created to provide limitations on medical information by employers. So this can be in a lot of different forms, but usually HIPAA is between the doctor and the patients, and employers have to make sure that there's confidential files, which leads me to the next famous act, which is the ADA, Americans with Disabilities. So oftentimes, many people might have to do an application for jobs, and they'll see a question asking, do you have any disabilities? And if so, what are they? So ADA is an act that prevents employers from using it against applicants, as well as collecting the information, but not reaching it out to anyone. So this information will always be hidden unless it is needed, but only with the consent of the individual that filed for the disability. And another famous act is the GINA Act, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So this excludes genetic information such as DNA that can be used to trace down family medical history, as well as go against HIPAA, which is one of the acts we mentioned above. And looking back at all these acts, we can see the Privacy Act of 1974. So this act was created to make sure that employees, as well as the federal government, are adhering to the laws and making sure that information is accessible to all employees and the federal records are present when needed. Moving on to the next place, China. So China has privacy protection, but not so much in the sense that they have a lot of acts and laws in place. They have what is known as a more rapidly and unified and comprehensive model. This model is called the Personal Information Protection Law. There is this law that sets strict rules on how employer information is collected. And usually what we can be told is that the Personal Information Protection Law is strictly dependent on the employer. It might not be standard across one corporation to the next. So it's important to make sure any documentation from the start is recorded and acknowledged very thoroughly. Employees should read over these things, which brings us to the next law, which is the cybersecurity law. As we know, there is a lot of cyber attacks that have been happening. And overseas in China, where there has been a lot of hackers, digital security, and the digital web, as we know, we are living in a digital world. It is all very important that there is requirements for organizing such large data. Usually it is through databases as well as the civil code, which is ensuring that personal rights such as dignity, reputation, and expectations are not going to be misused. Usually in most employers, there is a code of conduct, and these rules are set to make sure that employees and employers know how to respect one another and communicate correctly. Moving on to the next place, we have Indonesia. Indonesia, much like China, does not have a single workplace privacy law, or rather, a bunch of them. It has a few general rules that individuals try to lead into. Much like China, they have what is known as the Personal Data Protection Law. This is defining the personal data which is confidential, and there's always going to be basic obligations for how the data is collected, but we are unsure about the key procedures such as how they may request this consent, seeing as how usually for most privacy, there must always be consent. It is impossible for employers to think they can get away with just spreading out data without getting consent. And usually once that consent is given, we're unsure based off Indonesia's plan how long they keep the data. And this can cause quite a few concerns, seeing as how there's a lot of violations and these things are very taken seriously and they will be investigated if needed. But it is still unclear and unfinished to this day. What we can tell from Indonesia and their plan is that employers are usually expected to appoint a data protection officer that conducts risk management and procedures to ensure that employers and employees are following protocol and having safe and private information being conveyed between the one another. So let's look at it from a global impact point of view. Like mentioned before, China is based on a centralized political system, and that creates workplaces where there are very much so strict rules and close oversight, which might feel normal to the employees currently working, but from the outside, we see that these employees have to deal with stronger monitoring and harder situations. In Indonesia, there are cultural values that are emphasized within the community and respecting one another. It can usually be determined within culture, as we can see within different organizations, different religions, and different cultures and how they interact with one another. These norms definitely shape how comfortable workers are when working in these situations. And it's important to know that they have the correct legal protection when in need. Moving on to ethical considerations. So the United States focuses specifically on the department that it's in, much like how HIPAA, which is in the medical field, would not be beneficial in a business consulting company. China, on the other hand, is very ambiguous and they use several rules throughout their different departments to make sure that there's less personal control over information just because monitoring is expected here. And then in Indonesia, it's unclear, but what we can tell is that it's unsure, but people are working hard. So just for a conclusion, we can say that privacy laws are definitely slacking in some areas than another, but it's very essential to all workplaces, especially with technology, that there is monitoring. And the United States is a very good indicator of how other nations should be following, such as with the HIPAA Act and the ADA Act. But we can also look towards China with their clear structured system and Indonesia that is continuing to grow within these protection plans. And we hope that it can only benefit and grow from one another. And then here is a slide with my references. Thank you so much, everyone, for viewing my presentation. Bye.